let's start at the beginning. When were you born and where?
Okay, I was born in Granny and Grandpa Curtis's house in San Jose. But the family lived across the river in the Alger district in Greene County. And November 7th, 1928. I don't remember that.
What were you told about your birth and your infancy?
I haven't ever heard about that.
Okay.
After me came Gerald. I was born in 28, he was born in 1930. I had dark hair and he was a towhead. Uncle Armand, Mom's brother, called him Cotton. He had such white hair.
Okay.
And then Gordon came along, and Armand called him Pinky because he had red hair. So, and then Floyd was born in 1935 in January, and his birth story is the one we remember. You want to hear about that?
Sure.
Ken, I need my paper.
Where? Where is it?
Well, where it usually is.
What am I?
How do we edit this out? My nose wiper.
Oh, that kind of paper. I thought you had something written
Oh.
down.
We'll pause for a second.
Yes. Okay. Well, in the first part of January, 1935, Floyd was about to be born, and so because they lived on the other side of the river, and the river was flooding, Mother took the other three of us and went to her mother's house on the south side of the river to wait for Floyd's birth. Well, after she was there for a week or so, she thought about her husband and the guys that worked on the farm over there all by themselves trying to get by with nobody to cook for them and nobody to do anything else for them. So she took the kids and went back. So, well, that night, I don't know whether it was that night or the next, but soon after she got there, she realized it was time for the baby to be born. This was in the middle of the night on January the 16th. Floyd was born on the 17th. And it was rainy and stormy and the river was flooding. And they had left a car on the south side of the river so that they rode horses and waded the river and then used the car to do their town stuff. So Dad went out in the middle of the rainy night in January, cold as the dickens. It says it's the first time he ever was able to walk up to the horses and not have a struggle trying to catch him. So he caught the riding pony from Mom and put a saddle on it, and he caught a work horse for himself. And I don't know if he had a saddle or not. And so they left the other three children with whom? The hired hands, and headed for the river, which was almost a mile away, in the cold, rainy January night. When they got to the river, the horses had to swim the river. And Mother pulled her feet up and stayed pretty well dry from the river. But Dad was wet up to his thighs on the horse he was riding. And when they got on the other side, he had to run up to Uncle Don's house, which was another quarter of a mile away where the car was parked. Bring it down so he could get Mom there. And Floyd wasn't born during that night. It was the next day. But it was a big, hairy experience.
Oh, yeah.
And Floyd was a blue baby. They didn't know why, but all of his life he was short of breath. He couldn't play the trumpet in the band. He couldn't swim much. Couldn't do heavy things. And it wasn't until after he was married that they found out what the problem was and that it could be fixed. It was a vein kind of thing, a shunt that went from one part of the heart to the other part of the heart, not allowing the blood to go through the lungs to be oxygenated.
Right.
So there must have been another shunt that let some of it go through, or he wouldn't be alive. But anyway, so they prepared him for the surgery. It was after he was married, and I don't know what year it was. And as the doctor, the incision was from the back. And my brothers have hairy backs. They had to shave his back. He said the worst part of that whole ordeal was the hair growing back in. Anyway, when the doctor was about to be ready to close off the shunt, it burst. And so the blood came directly from the heart everywhere. And he tried to clamp it off, and they gave him 17 pints of blood. And as they clamped, they got his, what's the name of the nerve that goes to your, can't think of words, to your voice.
Vocal cords?
Vocal cords, and the things that vibrate together. What are those? The vocal cords?
I think so.
And so it shriveled one of those. So he didn't have anything to vibrate. After he recovered, he had a hard time talking, and because he had to take a great big breath and force the air out in a whisper to get people to understand him.
Right.
And during the course of that time, he was a Sunday school teacher. By the time he got through with a class, he was just faint.
Yeah.
But one time, a few years after that, he was at a party and was introduced to a man who said, "What's the matter with your voice?" So he told him. He says, "Oh my goodness, we can fix that." So they plumped up the poor faded vocal cord with Teflon so that they could resonate together. And he has a fairly decent speaking voice now. End of story.
Very good. What is your earliest memory?
I don't know if it's a memory, it's because I see pictures of these things.
Okay.
But our house was an adobe house that was there already when my folks moved into it, and Grandpa and Grandma. Grandpa and Grandma Carpenter lived in it when Mom and Dad got married, and because Mom was a telephone operator, and they didn't allow married women to be employed in those days, she lost her job. That's what they were counting on to live on in a place of their own. So they went and moved in with Grandpa and Grandma Carpenter. After a little while, Grandpa and Grandma left the farm to him and went to Eden to farm. So we were there somewhat by ourselves. My dad was a lovely father. I asked them why they didn't have more than 4 children. They said they weren't treating the ones they had right. But I think it's because of the Depression. See, I was born in 28, and the Depression was 29, so all those years that they had children were Depression years. It wasn't as hard on them as other people because they had cows and chickens
And turkeys.
and raised their own vegetables as much as they could. And so all they had to do was buy flour and sugar mostly. Well, there were other things, but you know. So they got by pretty good in the Depression. Grandpa Carpenter, during that Depression time, went to work for a friend of his, what's his name?
Claridge?
Ed Claridge. And he worked for $1 a day, plus a little house to live in and a cow during the Depression time.
And was tickled to death to have it.
Yeah.
Well, I've already written Grandpa's story, so the rest of that's in that.
Okay, very good.
There's Joy bringing your newspaper. Oh no, she isn't bringing your newspaper. You already got it. The memories are Christmases. I got a little red rocking chair and a little baby bed for my doll.
Well, we still have that, don't we?
Mother had made the doll. I still have the baby bed, the doll bed. And so every Christmas the doll would get new clothes. And I don't know what the boys got. I was self-centered from the time I was born until I got to be 79 years old. And I didn't pay enough attention to my brothers, which I'm so sorry about. But at some point, they got us a bicycle, and the house was kind of on a hill. The front of it was on level ground, and the back end was way up off the ground because the hill was down. And the house was on the hill. And so when we got the bike, the way we learned to ride the bike was to get on it at the top of the hill and go down.
Sounds exciting.
Oh yeah, it was exciting. And at the bottom of the hill was a garage. I never parked the car in it that I remember. But it had a unique smell. Old dirt. Old dirt has a smell.
The garage or the car?
Garage. Old dirt floor. Interesting. We used to play under the pomegranate trees. Well, you couldn't play under this pomegranate tree. Dad must have trimmed the branches up. But under the pomegranate tree was wonderful because the ground was really fine and it wasn't hard. You could make roads and houses and everything under the pomegranate tree. Silty, nice dirt. And we had chickens, brooding chickens. They get little chicks and have brooders. And the brooders were about this big around, 5 or 6 feet across, that were warm for the little chicks. And that's the first time I realized what the pecking order was. Because if one chick had something wrong with it, the other chicks chased it and pecked it unmercifully until it died. Too bad. But then, when Dad would clean out the chicken pens, I don't know if this was after the chickens were older, I guess so, we sold eggs. And I have a picture of me riding in the wheelbarrow on a big mound of chicken manure. I can't even think about that now. But at the time, it was fun. And Grandpa Curtis would come to visit us with his horse and wagon across the river and up through our field. And when my dad was about 17, his folks had moved up to the ranch we called it up in the Alger district. And he thinks he personally dug with a shovel all the holes to plant all the pecan trees. How many did they have? At least 75.
I was thinking 45, but I don't remember.
And
I remember
it was more than that.
years later, Uncle Chloe borrowed our big bulldozer and went and pushed them all down, dug out the roots.
They weren't profitable. And they needed the land for cotton and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But during the time they were productive, they hired crews to flail the trees with great long bamboo poles to get the nuts down. And it seems like some of the crews were Indian people. I don't know if they were colored people. Can't remember that part. But they would pick up the nuts, crack them, and pick out the nut meats and put them in big gunny sacks to sell. And one day I went out and ate so many nuts I was sick right out of the sack, you know. I did that later on with cherries too.
Yeah.
Don't know when to quit. At one time we had turkeys, and they would let the turkeys out to graze. And one day they climbed to the top of the mesas that were close by. Big wind came along, and the turkeys stood on the edge of the mesa, and the wind lifted them, and they ended up down in the yard. A lot of them broke their legs when they landed. A whole herd of turkeys flew down into the yard.
Wow. Okay, so you talked a little bit about where you play. Where did you typically play, and what were your favorite things to
Under
do?
the pomegranate tree,
Yeah.
as well as, I guess, in the house with the dolls and things. But out under the pomegranate tree was that you made little roads and houses and things. What little boys are supposed to do now. You know what little boys do now with their little cars? They throw them against the wall so they crash. It's the dumbest thing I ever saw.
So who did you play with? Mostly your brothers?
Oh, when I started to school, it was in a little red schoolhouse that Grandpa had donated the land for. And it was a typical one-room school. Little red schoolhouse with a big pot-bellied stove in one end. A belfry. They rang the bell when it was time to come to school. We had 9 grades and
How many students?
27. 27 students with 1 teacher and 9 grades. Poor teacher. But it was a fun school because when we had done our work, the teacher gave us fun things to do. Like, I remember one that she gave us was a book of punch-out things where you made little loaves of bread and made a bakery. Took a lot of time to do that while she was teaching the rest of the classes.
The teacher, incidentally, was my mother's older sister, Aunt Edna Brimhall.
That was my 3rd grade teacher. She must have been 2nd and 3rd, I don't know. I don't remember the 1st grade teacher, but the girl that was my age was Irma Jean Lucas. And she was my best friend at that time. We played together. I can't remember what we did, but at that same time, because of the Depression, the CCC camps were everywhere, and there was one up on the hill above our house. And Irma Jean was going to come over and play one day, but we went to town, so I wrote her a note and said, Irma Jean, we're going to town. The CCC guys came along later and interpreted the note as saying, imagine, we're going to town. So, kind of funny. We had no indoor plumbing. Outside the kitchen front door, was a pump, a hand pump that you operated by pumping it up and down, and the water ran out of spout. And the toilet was an outhouse where we put the Sears and Roebuck catalog. You had to crumple up the sheets really good before you could use them. chores were to gather the wood and chips from where they cut the wood for the stove in the house
Yeah.
so they could build fires. You had to have the stove going all year round, and so in the summer it was terribly hot because you had to cook the meals, you had to can the fruit, and so it must have been terrible. And you had to iron everything, heat the irons on the stove. So it must have been a really hot place for the summer to have a fire going in the in that room.
That's why you played under the pomegranate tree.
Yeah, I don't remember it being that hot, but it had to be.
What kind of a stove was it?
Just a wood stove, a cook stove.
I'm not familiar with what that looks like. What is?
Well, it's a freestanding stove with you have it's not a smooth surface. It has 4 not burners but plates that you can lift off with a tool to put the wood in.
Right.
Or it had a door in front you could put the wood in that way.
I can't remember that part. Yeah, and then the
So was
oven.
it kind of a rectangular?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
twice as long as it was wide.
Okay.
Yeah. And you had to, like I said, had to have the stove going most of the time. And the oven. It was so funny. When we went on our honeymoon, we had a wood stove in the cabin. I made biscuits one day and we fired up the oven. It took them 3 minutes to cook. It must have been really hot. So there was no way to judge temperatures. And
Up above, there was a thing came up the back of the stove, and up above there were some what were called warming ovens. There were 2 of them, and they were about that tall and about that deep. Somebody's child was premature.
it was Lane. Lane was born at 6 months. And he was born at home and not in the hospital.
This was Lane Millett,
So he's
Leona's first cousin.
Aunt Thelma's oldest child, next to oldest child. The oldest one died. And they put him in a shoebox in the warming oven, and he lived. Called me the other day. Where'd I get off?
So, did you say you lived in an adobe house?
An adobe house. And at first it was maybe just a two-room plus a sleeping porch. The sleeping porch was on the back end on stilts where the hill went down under it. And when I was little, we'd run back and forth on that sleeping porch. It was so much fun because it was a big, long sleeping porch. When I went to look at it later when I was an adult, it might have been 20 feet long, maybe not. Maybe 15. Funny how your perceptions are.
Oh, yeah.
So then later they built on the east side 3 more rooms, kitchen and 2 bedrooms. And I remember one time my dad was taking a bath in a number 3 tub. You know what a number 3 tub is?
No?
It's about this big around. You fill it with warm water and take your bath in it. And then you take the water out and water a tree or something with it.
So, I'm not familiar with an adobe house. How does that... does it look like?
Adobes are
What is it
made out of mud and straw, and they mix up that slurry and let it dry, and then they use it as building blocks.
They
And-
pour it into a mold that's twice as long as it is wide, and about 5 or 6 inches deep.
Maybe.
They put it in that and tamp it down good and smooth it off, and then take the wooden thing off of it and let it dry. And that's what that was instead of bricks.
Use it like a big brick.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about the floor?
The floor. I believe the floor was wooden. Because Grandma kept things really clean, and she'd keep the floor mopped and everything. And they lived there at the same time we did for a while. They lived in one side and we lived in the other in my memory time. Before that, there was only one part of the house.
Was there an upstairs?
Oh yeah, then there was an outside stair that went to the attic. And Uncle Mill, Grandpa's brother, never married, and he stayed there and worked on the farm quite a bit of time. And so he had his bed upstairs in the attic. But the attic was a special place, and Grandpa and Grandma didn't want us to go up there because it wasn't finished, and you might fall through the rafters. Had a few boards, you know. They had a trunk up there that was full of wonderful things. And I remember they had picture puzzles of all the presidents of the United States, and we liked to put those together. But most of all, they had a stereopticon. Is that what it was called?
Yeah. You heard of that, Jordan?
No.
You're going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was like a pair of binoculars, and then it had a sliding little board thing out here, and a holder for a picture. And the picture was almost a duplicate. It had two pictures, one on each side.
Each of the same thing.
Right.
But it had been photographed just a little bit from a little bit different space, so that through these glasses, and if you got it at the right place where it came into focus, it looked like one picture, and it was 3D.
Oh, okay.
It was just wonderful. We saw all of the wonderful things in the world in 3D.
Wow.
The Taj Mahal, the Eiffel Tower, everything. So it was fun to watch that. They had a big stack of pictures you could put in it. I don't know who has that. I'd like to see it again.
We had it for a while. I've forgotten what we did with it.
Somebody snatched it, I guess. That was fun.
Somebody put their name on it.
That's
And
right.
at the time my folks got married, or shortly after, Uncle Phil left home and went to Hawaii. And he learned to fly and had his own flying service in Hawaii. And on December the 7th, 1941, he was in the air when he saw the Japanese with their round red insignia on the planes coming in.
Really?
And he hightailed it back to his airport really quick. But that was his experience of Pearl Harbor Day.
And he called it in, probably.
I don't think he had radios in those days.
Okay.
I don't know what they had. But he sent Grandpa and Grandma a movie projector and movies. So at Christmas time we'd all gather and watch the movies. The main one was a fight between a cobra and a
Mongoose.
mongoose. The mongoose won.
It's kind of like an early YouTube. That's the kind of thing you
If
see
I
on
knew,
YouTube now.
if I knew what a YouTube was. and Grandma and Grandpa always had a big, beautiful Christmas tree. I don't know how big it really was. To me, it was really big. And they had real candles on little holders. You push the candle into a little sharp prick and lit the candles on the tree. It was probably really dangerous, but that's what they did.
So, were the rest of their kids gone? But you were living together, right?
At that time, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so there was, Aunt Thelma was the oldest. She went on a mission and then got married to Uncle Archie Millett from Mesa. And then Uncle Norm, he married Pearl Reed. And I don't know what they did with the very first part of their lives. Because when we left the farm in 1935 and came to Thatcher, they went up there. And they lived there for a few years with their family.
But they farmed that farm for a long time. And they built a house in Solomonville. By then you could...
Well, yeah, but they lived in that house up there where we
Yeah.
did for a long time too, before they did the house in Solomon. And then Uncle Phil went to Hawaii.
And stayed there afterwards for a long time.
Well, there was Aunt Thelma, Uncle Norm, my dad,
And
and then
Janice.
Phil, and Janice and Beth. And Janice married Les Layton, who was a returned missionary. And Beth went to nursing school. First of all, when we moved to Thatcher, she lived with us and went to EA. She had one dress. She'd wash it out every night and wear it again the next day. It was different times than now, for sure. And also, when we came down here, we rented rooms to college girls. So we had Mom and Dad, 4 kids, and 2 college girls over in that house. Kind of like Brooks and Suzette are doing.
So when you were in that house with your grandparents, who besides your parents and your siblings were there? Were there other aunts and uncles there, or did they already?
No, I think they were already gone now. During the growing up of their children, they rented rooms in Thatcher for them to stay during the week and go to school. So I remember their being there. Except, I think I'm about 7 years younger than Beth. And I remember her a bit because when I was 8, when we moved, she would have been 15. And she was probably the only one that might have still been there.
Tell me about a typical meal as a child.
Beans. We had a lot of beans.
Pinto beans.
But we also had what you would buy now would be pork loin, and it was just a round piece of meat, and you sliced off little round steaks, and you fry them and make gravy and biscuits. That was a good meal. Sometimes the men would go hunting and do quail, and we'd have quail and gravy. Always gravy, milk gravy with biscuits. So I think we mostly had pork. I can't remember sure if we had venison because they went hunting. Can't remember if we had beef or not.
And then a typical meal, who would be there? What would be going on when you were a child?
Well, I'm remembering mostly when we lived in this side of the house. It would be just our family. We didn't always eat with Grandpa and Grandma. I can't remember if they were even there at that time. They must have been, because we didn't use the whole house. We just used, except for a little while, when Mom's kids were little, we were in the other side of the house because she said she used to use the window wells, which were about this deep. The walls were about this thick. Did they use double walls with adobe? Why were they so thick?
I don't know, maybe they did them endways or something.
Could be. How do they look?
Well, then they would
look like
plaster
regular
them. They would
brick.
plaster them.
Well, this wasn't plastered. Just had the bricks sticking out. But anyway, Mother would use the window wells for play boxes for the kids. Put something up in front of it and they could play in the window wells and be up off the floor, and where she could watch them and do her cooking and stuff. But then Of course, with no electricity, we used coal oil lamps for any homework and stuff we had to do at night. But I was only there till middle of 3rd grade, and so my brothers, I think Gerald went to 1st grade there, and that was all. The rest of them didn't attend school at that time. The school was so interesting now to me. The play yard was surrounded by a fence, and we walked from our house to the school, and then we climbed over the fence on a stile. So I knew what a stile was early on.
What's a style?
You have a ladder on each side of the fence.
Oh, okay.
You climb up, and then you climb down.
Okay.
And in that same corner where we had the stile was a pump where we could get a drink. And they had a tin cup hanging there, so everybody got their drink out of the tin cup.
What work was expected of you as a child?
Well, I only remember having to get the wood and chips.
Mm-hmm.
I only remember that. I don't know what else there was. Must have been more. But I'm not sure that Mother could remember either, because she got a whole bunch of stuff mixed up when she was telling me about the $50 bill. So our memories are not good.
That's all right.
And we'd take a little box and go pick up the chips that were decently sized enough to use in the stove.
So what are some summertime memories as a child?
When the family got together, Dad's brothers and sisters, they played cards, and then they did quilting. I remember playing under the quilt and under the table where they were playing cards. So, but as far as summer activities, it was work time. We just stayed home and did usual things.
What are usual things?
Eat and sleep, I guess. I don't remember what we did. I remember going outside the house on the east side one time, and there was a multicolored snake there. And somebody said it was a coral snake, I don't know. But one time, Dad found a rattler in the house. So that's kind of scary.
And the Mexican boys playing the guitar. Tell him about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I was little, we had a dog named Bulger. And Mother said that he was very protective of me. If I went out and got too close to the ditch, not a canal, irrigation ditch, that the dog would get between me and the ditch. But in the evenings, the Mexican guys who lived farther up the road in Sanchez, after work, they would walk down the road playing their guitars and singing to go visit their girlfriends, I guess. And it was a sound that is really nostalgic to me.
I wonder if we should try to find some recordings of that somewhere.
Guitar music.
And I'd love to hear.
Mexican guitar music.
Yeah, what that sounds like. What the ones the style that you remember. That would be. We should try and do that.
It probably isn't now style, like the American music isn't the same style now.
Right.
Also,
Let's look into that.
when we were little and went to Grandpa and Granny's house over on the other side of the river, Granny Curtis, that was a fascinating place. Wow. They had a basement. Stone steps were on the outside of the house. We went down in the basement. It smelled different from any other place. They had a honey extractor down there, so it smelled like sweet honey, as well as damp earth. So it was interesting. And I think Mel and Fred or somebody had their beds down there. And there were snake skins on the wall and all kinds of things. And then she had the kitchen was typical kitchen wood stove table. And in her living room, she had a pump organ. You had to do your feet like this while you were playing in order to make it go.
Yeah,
It was
it was
kind of fun.
a simple little pipe organ. You made the air pressure with your 2 feet going like this all
Yeah.
the time.
But Grandpa and Grandma had lived first in a tent and then in a little shack thing that they built a lean-to on. Oh, excuse me. And when her boys were up old enough, they went to, I think they went to Morenci and brought lumber from the mines.
There were houses up in Rincy that they were getting ready to move the mine, and the houses were in the way, so they gave them away. You had to come and tear them down and haul
Okay.
them off.
So, but they didn't use the wood to make walls. They used them to make forms, and they poured the forms full of cement and rocks. So the walls of the house that they built were cement and rock. And Granny also had a carding machine. I don't know whether
Do you
she
know
did-
what she's talking about?
I don't know
To
whether
card wool.
yeah, I don't know whether they did wool or cotton. But she had a carding machine and made rugs and things.
Earlier, when you talked about in the summer you would do work and usual stuff, what kind of work did you do?
I think we played. We were kids. Little
Okay.
kids.
All right.
That's the work of kids. Should be.
Yes, that's right. What was something you really enjoyed as a child? What did you think that you could do this forever? If anything comes to mind.
No, I
Okay.
didn't have any goals at that time.
Not
Well-
goals, but just like, wow, this is great. I can do this forever, type of thing.
Nope, I can't think of anything like that.
All right.
When his Aunt Edna Brimhall was our school teacher, she started teaching me piano. And my folks gave her a place, and her husband came and built her a little house to live in during the week while she was up there teaching school. And then when we moved down here and she quit teaching up there, she continued to teach me piano. How come we had a piano?
Maybe she did.
Well, I had to practice. I don't know why we had a piano.
Maybe it came with the house.
Doubt it. Anyway.
Okay, picture yourself at church. Describe what you're seeing, hearing, feeling as a
Well,
child.
It was a little adobe church in Solomon. I can't remember that there were classrooms. I only remember the chapel part. It wasn't very big. But I remember giving a talk before I was 8.
Is that
Church.
building still there?
It's just that side of Faye and Don's.
Oh,
It was right over there. But I don't remember anybody going to church but me, but I'm sure that other people went because we always had a decent car because you had to have a car where we lived. And even as young as we still lived up there before I was 8, Dad would let me sit on his lap and steer the car.
What kind of car was it?
I don't know.
Plymouth, I think.
Remember the color?
Grandpa and Grandma had a Buick. I think all the cars were black then.
Henry Ford, you say you have any color you want as long as it's black.
That's right.
But I know that one car we had a rumble seat. Or else when I rode in. I don't know. But the talk I had to give in church was interesting to me in later years because we had a little children's Bible story book that I read and got the talk out of. In that was a picture of one of the old prophets, and he had a robe and a cap on. It wasn't an LDS book. A robe and a cap on that was quite similar to the temple. things.
Hmm.
Thought that was interesting. Didn't know that at the time.
Okay. What were some of the? Let me do this one. If you think about a painful or sad time as a child, can you describe what was going on and what you did and how you got through it?
Don't remember anything sad.
Okay.
My folks felt like it was a bad time for the family, but children don't feel the same way.
Well, talk more about that. What in terms of your family situation, financial situation, or whatever, what did you see or hear about what your parents were doing for work and
Well,
their other interests?
Dad was a farmer and chicken grower and all that kind of stuff, whatever they could do to make a little money. We had cows and sold cream. We had a cream separator, which is a big deal because you had to wash so many parts twice a day. I probably helped do that.
Everybody had what was called a cream can. It was about a 5-gallon metal jug with a heavy lid, and they'd pick that up once a week.
I'm not sure it was once a week because it would have been sour then.
But it didn't matter whether it was sour. It still made butter. That's what they... And there was a Lindsay's Creamery down up between Stafford and Solmanville that gathered all those, and you got a cream check once a month or something.
Oh, okay.
And they made butter.
Seemed like they came oftener than once a week. But I didn't
Whatever
know.
it was, they came. It didn't matter whether there was no... You didn't try to keep it from spoiling because that didn't affect it.
You didn't have any refrigerator.
Right.
But I think the folks' perception was that there wasn't enough money and that they weren't able to give their kids what they would like. But it wasn't our perception. Life was good. Never had any bad moments that I can think of.
Because this was all during the Depression, right?
Yeah. We moved away in 1935. Well, the year before that, my dad had taken out hail insurance because often hail would wipe out the cotton crop. And so he took out hail insurance, and it hailed and wiped out the crop, and he got enough money to come and buy this place down here. So the insurance was a big, good thing. Mama says they looked for farms in Eden and all the way up, and she didn't want to live that far away from... This is civilization. Mm-hmm. This is Zion here. Mm-hmm. In fact, my dad called it Zion. We're going to move to Zion.
And he was involved in... Let me give you the legal history. They had this Globe Equity 3059 or whatever it was, big lawsuit between the government representing all the Indians and the farmers up here, and they reached an agreement.
And that was in 1935.
Well, no, it was before that when they... Anyway, they reached this agreement, a consent decree they called it, and everybody signed up, and there was a... I think I still have my copy of that huge decree. Anyway, every farmer up here had a priority. The ones who diverted their water later were way down the list. If there was not enough water, they didn't get any. This grandpa was able to buy this 50 acres or whatever he bought here almost for nothing because it was one of the lowest ones on the
Didn't
totem
have a
pole.
decree.
Almost immediately after he did that, the local farmers here all got together and said, this is ridiculous to be parceling all this water out. Let's just treat everybody the same. So they did. For men on this farm was worth something. It was nothing he did. He just happened to be here at the right time.
Yeah. Other than family and work, what kind of interests did you see your parents having as a child?
Oh, just the family gatherings with Dad's brothers and sisters. Mother was a more social person, and my dad was shy, and that was a big problem all their married life.
And
She was
when we went to the temple to be married, of course, Grandpa and Grandma, I mean, they had been married in the temple, etc. But he was too bashful to go. But he went, and during the time we were there to be married, they had a chapel session, and the temple president had been the stake president up here. He had performed the civil wedding for them when they got married. So he called on Grandpa to say the closing prayer.
He did just fine, but it scared him to death.
And so about 6 months later, Gerald and Donna went to the temple to get married, and he wouldn't go. We asked him why, and he said they might call on me to pray. We said, if we get it in writing from the temple president that he won't call on you, he said, that's the only way I'll go. So we did.
Yeah. And what was your question?
Yeah,
I
before
think that was it. I think that was it. From your perspective as a child, what did you see that made your parents happy or sad, or if you recall?
Well, I guess I wasn't very perceptive, but Mother was so thrilled to move down here into civilization, into a house that had running water and a heater and
an indoor toilet.
everything that was
Grandpa
good.
wouldn't use that for 2 or 3
Well,
years. He used the outhouse.
Uh-huh.
But that was, and as far as Dad was concerned, always getting the work done. But he came in at 12 o'clock for lunch and 5 o'clock for supper, except for when he was irrigating and stuff. He had a hard work life, hard. When they moved down here, he farmed and worked for the gin during the ginning season at night. So I know that was really hard. But anyway, he didn't have other outside interests besides family and farm.
Tell me about your relationships with your siblings, with your brothers. Were there rivalries, alliances?
It was okay. I remember getting mad at Gordon a lot of times. And I don't know why. It was stupid. You could say it's because he was a redhead. I don't know. But I also remember sticking up for him at school when he was a teenager. I heard somebody
Hello, you dolls.
saying something about him, and
Hello, Aunt Tina.
I accosted them.
Every day gradually better. Still not perfect.
None of us is very
How are
vocal
you?
in our affections.
I'm fine, but I asked first. We got that out of the way, didn't we?
Clyde called me the other day. He said lovely things, and it made me cry. So forget that.
I got another big bottle yesterday.
I don't think I deserve the things he said, so that makes me cry. I haven't been involved in their lives as I should have been.
Yeah.
But we all had families, and
She did.
hard to. Over here with these families, they're very involved with each other. The cousins are the best friends of each other, and all kinds of things like that.
Come when you can.
So,
Bye, buddy, honey.
and of course, when we were in Gilbert, we had a lot to do with Gerald because our kids and theirs were kind of the same age.
Yeah.
So I guess it wasn't as bad as I'm thinking it was. But I do know that I haven't been as thoughtful of them as I could have been.
As a child, you guys played together a lot and did things together.
Well, the boys, they played and fought. We had a horse, and Gerald and I mostly rode it. We were teenagers, but not together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember interacting with them very much, and that's a sad thing for me.
What are some of the childhood, I guess, scenes that made a lasting impression on you? What are your...
Time out. I should have said, time out. Down here, the house was so wonderful. And you could run all the way around the inside of it, through the doors, and we did that. When we were right off the bat, neighborhood kids came, we played kick the can and run sheepy run and all those things that you play outside when you're kids. And we did a lot of that kind of thing.
What is Run Sheepy Run?
Do you
Not
remember what
familiar with
Run
that
Sheepy Run is?
I don't remember, but it sure was fun.
And we used to play Mother May I on the porch. This had a long porch.
There was another game called Kick the Can.
Yeah, we did kick the can.
Yep.
And the neighborhood girl who was several years older than I, she must have been 4 or 5 years older than I, used to play stick horses up and down the ditch. We'd get on our stick horses and jump the ditch and run up and down the ditch on our stick horses. So she must have been at least 12 or 13 when I was 8 or 9.
Who's that, Mary
Okay.
Smith?
Mary Smith. But she was a good friend even though she was older.
What are some of your favorite childhood memories that you like to relive?
Well, let's see. Most of them are as teenager, not
Okay.
young.
We'll get to that.
But when we first moved down here, we didn't have a cooler, and so it was still hot. And so we would put our beds outside. There was a big mulberry tree out in back, and we take our beds out, sleep outside in the summer. That was nice because it was cool enough by the time you went to bed.
The flies would wake you up in the morning when it got...
Had to pull the sheet up over your head. But all you needed was a sheet. And when we came down here, Dad brought many grapevines with him because Grandpa Carpenter had a whole vineyard of grapes. And so we brought plantings from them. And so the grapevines, some of the grapevines we have are those that Grandpa had on the ranch before when I was a kid, you know. So some of these are really old.
Well, the next section is the teenage years. Or anything else from your childhood that we missed or didn't talk about, or you want to talk more about?
When did you get the horse? How old were you?
We must have been teenagers. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to ride. Maybe Dad had the horse before that, but I don't remember having it, and he didn't have time to ride the horse. He had work horses, and then we kept the riding horse after those horses were gone. Because I had that horse clear up till I was way in high school. But what was the question?
I was just saying that the next section is teenage years. So is there anything else you wanted to talk
Oh.
about or expound on from your childhood?
Nothing comes to mind. I haven't been pricked to a memory.
Okay.
Too bad.
No, this was good. This is great. Good stuff.
What was that horse's name? Lady?
It was Lady.
That's my earliest memory of your mother, is seeing this beautiful young girl riding on that horse, bareback.
No, I don't think I did bareback.
That's my memory. First time I saw you were bareback.
I think Gerald did bareback, but I don't think I did.
And they would do it, and he'd rear up on his hind legs.
Gerald could do. We can make her do that. But that horse had a colt. It was a Palomino, and we got tired of having the colt follow us around as we went riding. So one day we tied the colt up and left it home. When we came back, it had tried so hard to get loose that it broke its back.
Ah,
Had to
awful.
shoot it. Terrible. It's terrible.